Hello, and welcome to the 12.3 GitLab kickoff call. My name is Scott Williamson. I'm the VP of Product. I'll be your MC today. Thank you very much for taking the time and for following along with what we're doing here at GitLab. We value all of you as customers very much. Thank you for all your contributions. So we're gonna switch up the format a little. We've gotten big as a product team. We've almost doubled since I joined about a quarter ago, and we're adding lots of issues in an ever expanding number of categories. So because of that, it's become difficult for every PM to address their specific issues. So we're going to raise it up a level. We're going to have leaders of what we call sections present the highlights from their area. You can still get deeper details. As you scroll through this doc, you can see links to kickoff recordings for most of the sections, or most of the stages rather. And that goes into deeper detail in that particular area. You can also click on links to each issue that you would like, and you can contribute directly there. So with that, I want to introduce quickly Kenny Johnston, Eric Brinkman, and Jason Lenny are our leaders of, so Eric covers dev, enablement. Kenny covers ops, secure and defend, and Jason covers CI/CD. So we'll see them soon here. Let's start with Eric. Eric, what are the highlights for you in 12.3 in the dev area?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Super excited to kind of test out this new format. I think it's going to be good as we coalesce all of our feedback. So yeah, a few really exciting things that are happening in the dev department today for 12.3. So the first thing I want to highlight is that we are really focusing on a lot more analytics capabilities. And so if you're able to show a few screenshots from those first two issues, the first issue here is that we're going to start providing some code analytics, and this is going to be language trends over time. So right now we don't provide any sort of lines of code metrics or types of languages that we support and how your code base is evolving over time with respect to the languages that you have. So we're going to start providing that in 12.3. Super excited to get deeper into code analytics, which we view as a really interesting space for us to expand upon our platform. The other issue here is visualizing the flow and type of work. So this should help teams understand where their team members are spending time on. So if you're able to scroll down just a little bit more, there's a few, those two graphs right here that we'll be introducing in 12.3, which will let engineering managers and product managers understand the type of work that teams will be doing based on labels. So you'll be able to filter and sort these graphs by various labels to understand how many tasks were open for a particular label on a given day, allowing you to easily and quickly see the type of work that is being done by the team. And then the other graph on the right is showing the tasks by stage. So it's a cumulative graph that shows how many tasks are in flight and by which stage. This is building onto the previous cycle analytics capabilities that we've launched in 12.2. So that's it for analytics. And if we go back to the kickoff doc, I'll talk through a few more things. We have some other controls coming with respect to GitLab. So in our manage stage, we have three groups total: analytics, which we already talked about, and then we have access and import. So with respect to access, we're going to provide a few more capabilities on the kind of control around who can access your GitLab environment. So we're going to extend group IP address restrictions to multiple subnets. And then we're also going to put Git and API activity and put that together so that you can limit who is actually doing Git and API activity by IP address. Currently, you can only limit UI activity by IP address. And then the last thing I want to highlight on manage is that we're going to spend a little bit more time working on first-class importing. So these are going to be from very common tools that people might be importing from or migrating to GitLab from. Bitbucket is one of those. But one of the problems that we've run into is if you just import all of your projects at one time from Bitbucket, it can take a long time. you may not actually want to migrate all projects. And so we're actually providing some filtering capabilities so that people can choose the projects that they want to import from Bitbucket. So excited to see that as well. And then lastly, for manage, I just wanted to quickly touch on the LDAP block. So right now, if you have LDAP block enabled, you can't actually manually add a new user. And we're going to introduce this ability. This is useful for maybe contractors that you actually don't want in your company's LDAP, but do need to have access to your instance. Moving on to plan. So some really exciting stuff coming for plan. We're going to make improvements to our roadmap bars. We're going to show the weight and progress on the bar itself, so you can understand how far along you are when you look at the roadmap view. Really exciting stuff. Go back. Yep, creating issue from Epic. We've talked about this. I think in the last kickoff call, we're going to do that. There's a screenshot right here, which is the first iteration of how we're going to allow you to make issues from epics. Super exciting as we start to prioritize top-down work, and we make GitLab a little bit easier to use for portfolio and project management. We're redesigning the issue list row. There's a screenshot for that as well that just makes the issue list just look a little bit more modern. And then the one that Scott's on right now is viewing the history of changes to an issue or MR or epic description, which is long overdue, and I'm sure will be very useful to most people listening on the call right now. And so you can see the initial implementation here is if you click on a system note where you've changed the issue description, you're able to kind of toggle various edits that were made, have that all version controlled. I know that's been a long frustration for many GitLab team members and the wider community as issue descriptions have been lost, they get overwritten, previous information that lives in those were not versioned. So really, really excited to see this happen in GitLab 12.3. So that's it for plan. And then we'll quickly move on to create and then on to the other sections. So for create, just a quick few improvements on some of the merge request approvals. So we're going to allow overriding of merge request approvals via the API, something we don't currently do today. So excited to see that. We're going to start logging git push actions so that GitLab admins can understand who and when something was pushed. So that's allowing our users to more easily audit what they've done in the application. And then something I just want to highlight real quickly is file by file diff navigation is something that we've received a lot of feedback on. So right now, when you review an MR, it's just a very long list of files in that merge request. And what we're going to do is we're going to do what we're calling a discovery sprint, where we're going to look at improvements on how we can make that a little bit easier to navigate, maybe show one file at a time and click through. So we're gonna spend next week iterating on that and hopefully making some really cool improvements there. Last thing to highlight for dev, and then I'll pass it on, is our knowledge and editor sections, knowledge and editor groups out of our create stage. So for knowledge, we just launched design management, and we want to make it easier for users of that feature to know if a design was added or if a design was modified. And so we're going to add visual indicators that will allow our users of the design tab. And if you scroll down just a little bit more, you can see that designs tab right there, just up a little bit more, right there, right next to that discussions tab, down just maybe 2 inches. right next to that discussions tab, no worries.
Yeah. Got it.
There's now a designs tab. This is the design management feature. You can upload designs there. And so these improvements on notifications of new designs and other comments will be made in this tab. And that's all I wanted to highlight for the dev section. Thanks so much, Scott.
Thank you, Eric. Nice work. Let's move on to Jason.
Hey, Scott. Eric, I'm so excited for the diffs on the edits to the descriptions. That's a game changer. I would be super happy if that was the one thing you're delivering in this entire. That's great. Thank you for that, and thank you for all the other awesome stuff.
Absolutely.
In terms of the Verify team and for CI/CD overall, one thing that I'm really excited to be delivering this time is filters for pipelines, and that will let you see. The pipeline page has become very busy, and for larger teams, for larger groups, there can be hundreds or even thousands of pipelines that are in place there. So we're adding the ability to filter by things like branch status, in order to make it easier to go right into what you're looking for. This will be something that we can expand on in the future and help build unique views around, what your, maybe the things that you care about personally. So that'll be really, really great to get in there. The next one is installing the group runner. We're making that much, much easier if you're using Kubernetes. It's easy to install the group runners or install the runners at the project level, but we'll make that easier with just one click to do the same thing with your groups as well. On the package side, we're adding the Conan package manager, which is a package manager for C and C++, which will bring our great package management features to a whole new class of user. So Linux developers, anybody who's using C++, game developers, this is going to be a handy feature to do artifact management in the same way that you can do in GitLab today, like with NPM and Maven. And then on to release, where there's a couple features that are very, very close to my heart. The first is adding feature flag permissions. So this is the ability to control who's able to change permissions on feature flags. This is really, really important to be able to roll this feature out and say, in the production environment, I only want users who are, site administrators or part of our change process to be able to change a feature flag status. So with this issue, you'll be able to then do that. We're also making a really, really important fundamental change to the data model within GitLab around associating milestones with releases. So this is a small change, just linking up 2 bits of data between 2 kinds of entities within GitLab, the release and the milestone. But linking these things together is going to unlock so many amazing things. In the initial release, we're just going to be doing the issues and merge requests. I say just, but this is a really cool feature. We're going to make it so that from a release, you can just go see all of the issues that are in the release, all the merge requests. You can see a burn down chart for that release, all based on just tying these things together. In the future, we're going to be able to do really, really cool things like I'll do automatic evidence collection for how, all of the things that are happening in the issues. So taking advantage of that nice diff feature to say how issues changed over time, what commits were made associated with those changes, and then tying all that together and making it all visible from a single release view. Good stuff. And then finally, making a nice architectural improvement for pages. If you've deployed a new pages site, you've probably seen that it takes 15 minutes or a bit longer to actually get the site up for the first time after the deployment finishes. We're changing the way that's done on the back end, so that's going to be immediate or near immediate in the future. So if you spin up a new site, it's going to be there. You're going to be able to view it very, very quickly. So another one that's going to make a nice quality of life improvement for everybody out there who's using pages. And that's it for me, Scott. That's the CI/CD changes in this release.
Thank you, Jason. Awesome job. Over to Kenny.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. My name is Kenny Johnston. I'm the director of product covering the ops stage for this portion of the discussion. I'm super excited about that diff feature on the issues as well, Eric. And Jason, I like the powerfulness of associating milestones to releases. Super excited about both of those. In the configure stage, I'll start with that. There are a couple of just thematic ongoing improvements that we've been making. Configure, a big portion of configure is our Kubernetes management capability. And so you can attach a Kubernetes cluster, and over the last series of releases, we've enabled you to attach that cluster at different levels, from the project to the group to your entire instance. And so we've also been adding support for different applications being installed at those various levels. So this last release, we worked on Prometheus. This release, we're going to be working on Jupyter Hub being installed at the group level. These are all really important as we're seeing more and more of our users using those Kubernetes clusters for kind of centralized administration of resources that then all the development teams can kind of utilize independently, really to enable them to operate more quickly and not have to manage their own cluster. Similarly, we've also been improving that Kubernetes management by enabling you to update as well as uninstall the services that the managed apps that you can deploy, things like Prometheus or a runner or Jupyter Hub. We're now adding in the ability to update them and then also kind of clean up. So if you have a cluster that you've attached to a project, but you want to remove all the different resources that were created when you attached it, like namespaces and permissions, you can, when you detach it, it will also perform a bunch of that cleanup. So those are all pretty cool things. Also, as part of the move to having group-wide and instance-level Kubernetes clusters, there became a kind of confusion point about which cluster it was actually deployed to, because a project might have access to both a group and a project level cluster. So that issue that's highlighted shows a little graphic of how when you deploy in the deployment process, it will also show you the specific cluster that it's deployed to. So that's the configure section. Really excited about a number of the improvements going on there. In the monitor stage, we have first have the health group, which is really focused, at least in the short term, around our recent addition of incident management. So in 12.1, we had an MVC, and in 12.2, we'll be adding some new capabilities. But I'm really excited about this next set of features that unlock kind of really enabling the responders to incidents to get engaged in what the team calls the firefight. And so there are some first steps in the Zoom interaction where we want to ensure that we can authenticate with a Zoom API, and you can kind of configure that at the project level. But that, similarly to what Jason said, is an unlocking first step for a number of really cool improvements, like in the issue showing whether the status of the Zoom call, or the number of participants in the Zoom call, or then having the API post back the chat discussion or a video onto the issue itself. So really cool interaction. We found that Zoom is a highly used tool for incident responders, and so we really want to make that part of the firefight awesome. Same thing with Slack. So today we have chat ops commands for interacting with issues, but we want to add some new capabilities for interacting with issues specifically around the workflow for incident responders. So there's some cool features going on. And then again, in that kind of firefight mode, if you're today you can embed in 12.2, you'll be able to embed graphs from the GitLab sponsored metrics, so graphs straight from our dashboards. But we also found that a number of our users were using a common tool, Grafana. So we want to be able to kind of quickly add snippets to Grafana dashboards and build those in and display those in the incident issue and kind of unfurl them and have them live updates. So this first MVC is about getting Grafana integration in. So those are the ones in the health department, which again is really about, it's really focused on incident management at the moment. On the APM side, we're in 12.2, we're releasing this new functionality where the self-monitoring of your GitLab instance. So as an administrator of your GitLab instance, you want to know the health of the instance overall. It's critical to your development team and your business's productivity. And so we've in 12.2 are building in a new project that is kind of specifically created to use the monitoring tools that we have for your own applications as you build applications to monitor your GitLab instance. And so this is a great way to also expose users to the features that are available in our monitoring stages. But the next step after adding that project is to ensure that incidents are created and that we have templates available for self-monitoring so that we capture and display really smart information so that those administrators who are in the firefight to ensure that their GitLab instance is up and running, as well as our support team, can engage and have access to data immediately. And then another one that I'm personally excited about is source controlled alerting. So today, when you set up alerts in our monitor stage there, it's on a managed Kubernetes instance or managed Prometheus instance on your Kubernetes cluster. And you don't get much exposure to the actual raw configuration. And so that means if you want to do complex things like send your alerts to PagerDuty or some other service that has a webhook, you kind of have to do that out of bound. We'd like for you to be able to supply an alert manager configuration file in your repository and have that automatically deployed to the Prometheus application so that you can get a lot more customization in your alerting. And then, yeah, that's it. Those are the ones I'm excited about for the ops section. Scott, I'll just roll on into the secure and defend ones, if you don't mind.
You bet.
I'm also covering those too. So in secure, we have a number of improvements in removing Docker and Docker, which one of them in our SAS scanners was discussed in the last kickoff, but we're also doing this same process in dependency scanning, which unlocks some complications involved with the dependencies between using Docker and Docker, so that it became difficult for users to set up scans for projects that didn't have the same dependency list as our scanning tools. Sounds very technically complicated, but really what it enables is our users to have more flexibility in how they can do scans and what types of applications they can out of the box scan with our security scanning tools. We'll also be adding license compliance approvals to the merge request, similar to how we have in 12.2, we'll be adding the ability for security administrators to state that they want some additional approval required when vulnerabilities of a certain severity are found. We want to do the same thing with license compliance. And then the last one is in our DAST scanners, as they're getting more mature, we've realized that there's a potential for harm in accidentally supplying your DAST scanner with a domain that is not under your purview. That would essentially have you go spidering out to a domain that you don't have ownership of, which can be considered malicious in some cases. So we're making sure that we add domain validation when performing DAST results going forward. And then the last issue in this new section for defend, which for those who are unaccustomed, is our entry into the security operations space. So not just responding to application security concerns by doing scanning on your code, but also responding to production security concerns by monitoring your application in production. And so we have a first MVC in this new stage and section to enable an open source WAF addition, a WAF tool to your ingress controller on Kubernetes. So if you've attached a Kubernetes cluster, you're using our ingress controller, that it will add this additional tool to spot malicious behavior and add it to the logs. And eventually we hope to have that create alerts and incidents for you so that you can respond appropriately when malicious behavior is found on your production applications. So those are the ones I'm excited about for the secure and defend stage. Scott, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Kenny. Great work. We got one more section to go. I'll provide a bit of context. Enablement, you can think of this as underpinning domain areas that support the whole feature and function set. So, things like our installer, our ability to run GitLab.com with a low amount of memory, our ability to enable customers to do failover and disaster recovery, that kind of thing, that aren't feature function stage specific, roll up through this enablement section. So with that, Eric, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I'm going to highlight just a few things from each of the teams in enablement. And I want to call them out because, one, these teams do awesome work and they don't always get the level of customer-facing success that other feature teams might be getting, but they're ultimately super important for, one, how GitLab performs and for how it runs, and ensuring that its performance and that it has appropriate options for deployment capabilities across cloud native installs and various packages. We've heard time and time again that some of our upgrade experience is one of the easiest out there for any enterprise application. And so we take great pride in that. And so hats off to all of the enablement teams working on these things. So I'm just going to call out just a few things that these teams are working on. So we'll start with distribution. The distribution team starts, has a bunch of work just in general, every release, on making sure that our omnibus and our Helm charts are updated. So obviously not highlighting that work, but it's work that they do every month. I do want to call out two things, though, that the team will be focused on. The first is we're going to create a set of our cloud native GitLab, or what we call our CNG. If you're trolling through our issues, you might see CNG. That's what it stands for, is cloud native GitLab. We're going to create a set of these CNG images using the RHEL universal base image, or UB7, as you might have heard of it. And the reason that we're going to do this is because, one, we want people who are either have a support contract with Red Hat or desire to use that as a foundational piece of their platform to be able to use our cloud native GitLab images. And then the second reason is because we're going to take this and build on it and start to provide hardened containers that are powered by the universal base image here by RHEL. And so super excited for both of those things. Hardened images and hardened containers is something that is really important for a lot of these regulated industries. And so really excited that we're going to spend a little bit more focus and time on this. One other thing I also want to highlight is if you're a user of our listings in the AWS marketplace, you probably were confused when you searched for those because you probably saw a CE listing and then the EE listing. And unless you know the nuances of what each of those mean, you maybe weren't even sure which one to get. And so we're going to remove the CE listing. And the reason that we're going to do this is CE is what we call Community Edition. The reason we're going to do this is because the CE listing is basically the same functionality of an EE deployment without a license applied. And so it'll streamline the user experience. It'll allow them to select the correct one when they deploy from the AWS Marketplace. But it also provides one other benefit, which is when a user wants to upgrade. So say they use GitLab for a while and they really like it, and then they want to become a paid member, or they want to apply a license into one of our higher tiers. All they have to do is simply apply a license. If they were running CE, they would have had to redeploy into the EE version. And so really, really excited to streamline this. And this is going to be the first step in streamlining this process for all of our marketplaces. I also want to highlight real quick on the memory team. So moving on to the memory team, we are going to enable Puma on GitLab.com in this release. This is really exciting because Puma is a multi-threaded web server that should allow us to reduce the memory footprint of GitLab. And the reason we're going to start with this on GitLab.com is to prove out that this is one performant, that it gives us the memory reduction that we need, and then obviously turn this on by default in a subsequent version of GitLab so that these memory reductions can be realized by other users of GitLab as well. So really excited to see this, and great work to the memory team. And then the last team I'll highlight here is our Geo team. So Geo is our product for disaster recovery and high availability. So 3 things the Geo team is going to be working on in 12.3. Verification of uploads, job artifacts, and LFS objects, and making that automatic. Right now, the verification of a lot of replicated objects is a manual process. And so we're going to automatically do that and then provide feedback back to the user to let them know that these objects have been verified when they've been replicated. The second thing is we want to make improvements so that users don't have to know about a whole bunch of Geo instances out there to get the best performance out of the one that's closest to them geographically. You can already do this today with a single Git URL. So we're going to document how to do that so that you can just use the same Git commands and then pull the information from the closest Geo node that you have. Obviously, there's a whole lot more to do here in terms of making the experience more seamless and always pulling from the closest and most performant Geo node. But this is something that we can do today from a single Git URL. We're going to document it and make it easy to use. And then the last thing I want to highlight is the support of design repositories. So the way that we store design assets in GitLab is using LFS. Those objects are not replicated today, and we're going to have Geo support replication of those objects in 12.3. That's it for the enablement section, Scott. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Eric. I think it's fair to say this is going to be the best release ever. So thank you to Kenny, Jason, and Eric for walking through the highlights. There's a ton here, and want to give a shout out to all the contributors behind the scenes that are allowing us to innovate at this pace. It's exciting to be a part of. And thank you to everyone who joined and who has an interest in GitLab and who is following along and investing in GitLab. We appreciate it. We also want to make sure this meeting is as useful as possible for you. If you're in the doc, you can click on a survey link here. It's a Google survey. We appreciate your feedback. You can also get to this from the YouTube channel as well. Thank you all very much. Have a good one.